Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Craydon show. Today, we're going to dabble into the mind of an actress, a young actress that's clearly rising in the film entertainment industry. She lives in the UK, England, but the road to the film industry is clearly different than the film industry that's in the United States. And she's going to share with us that journey. Welcome to the show, Isla Hughes, all the way from the UK. Welcome, Isla. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's get right down to it. Who exactly is Miss Hughes?
Ah, well, I'm autistic actually, and that's a massive part of my personality, my journey. I'm an actress. I've been acting since I was 3,
Wow.
and I'm also I write as well. I'm a poet, which I think most actors tend to have that side of them. Yeah, and I've been working on my career since I was 3 years old.
You mentioned a tender age of 3. I can relate. In the United States, we put our kids through all kind of activities, mainly soccer and sports. You very seldom see a 3-year-old venturing off into the entertainment field. Usually, the parents usually see some type of talent in their child and kind of steer them. At the age of 3 years old, what did your parents or how did you get nussed over into that entertainment field?
So I seemed to kind of come into this world knowing that that's what I wanted to do. I could literally sing before I could talk. I used to imitate things. I really had even then a need to imitate people and
Right.
life. And I remember I watched Hello Dolly with Barbara Streisand in it, and it was on a tiny little TV. And I watched it with my godmother, and my entire life just changed. I remember just thinking, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And there was this fire that was ignited in me, and I've always been extremely strong-willed and
Right.
stubborn. And so it was never my parents or my family's decision. They just, I was lucky enough that they said, okay, try it out, and I just never stopped.
Right. Now, you said you came into the world knowing. Explain that a little bit, because that's really deep. You don't hear many people say, I came into this world knowing I was going to be destined to do this.
Hmm. Yeah, I count myself very, very lucky to have known what I wanted to do and to have had a purpose for my entire life. And there is not a single moment of my life that I remember not wanting to act, not wanting to perform. My entire life has revolved around it. I spend all of my time immersed in this world, and I just have a love so deeply for it. But I tried as I grew up to do something else, and it just never felt the same. There wasn't that spark of passion, that fire. And so I just had this fire in me since I was tiny, and I always believed to follow the love, follow the passion, and try not to waste your energy elsewhere, because we've only got one life. You might as well follow the love.
That makes perfect sense. And you're only 21 years old, but you speak with so much experience,
Thank
so to
you.
speak. But I guess it would be experience for you because you already knew what your journey was and your purpose at such a young age. You mentioned your godmother.
Mhm.
Um, how was she an influence into your life as well as your parents?
So my mother was actually, she's queer, and so she was in a relationship with my godmother, and she was at the time that I was born. And so I ended up kind of being raised by 3 people, two wonderful women and my amazing father, who's wonderful.
Hmm.
And they all brought different things to the table. But one thing that my godmother did for me was she, exposed me to all of her favorite films so early on. The Sound of Music, Meet Me in St. Louis. She's a massive musical theatre fan. Singing in the Rain.
Hmm.
And I was watching all of these films with incredibly passionate and talented people in, but that were also talented in all three disciplines. They were actors, they were singers, and they were dancers. There was no limits.
Hmm.
And especially with musical theatre, it's taking you beyond reality while still feeling rooted
Right.
in the story. And that kind of taught me very, very early on that there is no limit. You can do whatever you want to do. You can be whoever you want to be, because film is a great example of that.
You mentioned something that's interesting. Here in the United States, and I guess the world, we're seeing a lot of human identification
Mm.
take place. Topics about the lesbian career, the gay career, the transgender career. But here it is, you're in the UK.
Mm.
You was raised different by several beautiful women, and you mentioned a father.
Mhm.
What is it like in the UK with that type of environment versus what you see happening across the pond?
Mm. Good question. I'm very lucky. I count myself to be very blessed that I was always open-minded
Mhm.
by naturally, because I was surrounded by so many different types of people with different walks of life. And I
Mhm.
had a dad and two mums. And it was never an issue for me, because I'm also part of the LGBT community,
Okay.
and that has nothing to do with my upbringing, except for the fact that I think I was open to it. It was never a fight, so
Right.
I've never
You didn't meet
really,
it with
I've never really
resistance.
cared.
Yeah, you didn't meet it with resistance because
Hmm.
it was probably it was probably never an uncomfortable situation in England versus
Yeah.
other regions.
Yeah, I think there's been, and at least from what I've seen in my lifetime so far, there's been a lot of progress made, but I'm also seeing a lot of regression,
Mhm.
uh, and hatred and fear. I think that the ultimate thing in life is choosing love or choosing fear,
Mhm.
um, and I know which one I prefer.
Mhm.
And I never experienced prejudice and hatred because of who I was raised by and who I am, until I was around the age of 12, 13, where, your children are getting to the age where they're starting to question things, but they're also learning how to communicate
Right.
things. And you really started to see the influence of the parents' opinions on their children.
Mhm.
And then eventually that changed again when you get to a point where you realize, actually, I can make my own decision,
Mhm.
on how I feel. And so I've seen it, but I do think that there is a massive difference across the world in terms of attitudes. And I think the UK, whilst there still are a lot of issues,
Right.
with prejudice, it's a lot more of just everyone, you do you, just get on with who you are. And I think as long as no one is in harm's way.
So
um
21 years old, has that affected your involvement in your career path? Like, I'm pretty sure you've been to the United States and did some endeavors here, I take it. But
yeah,
has,
I've
has there been any resistance?
no, I actually think it's been a pro for me. The same with it's this. I did have a debate with myself when I was 17 or 18, and I was at drama school, about listing. It's like on all of the casting sites, listing that you're queer, or listing that you have a disability. And there was a very prominent argument at my drama school in that time about how those things are accepted in the industry, particularly my disability. And I made a choice then that I am who I am. Those parts of me are just a reason. They're not, it's not a big important part of me. I don't introduce myself that way, but they're a part of who I am. And actually, anything that you can do to show who you are when in this industry, the more beneficial it is, because we've already got Meryl Streep, we've already got, Angelina Jolie, we've got all of these people. So the more you can show who you are, down to disabilities, sexual orientation, things like that, the more someone gets to know you, the more a casting director is interested and more directors are interested because you're open.
Right.
You're surrendering to who you are. So I'm lucky that that's never really been a resistance. And actually, my first big audition was whilst I was at drama school, and it was for a pilot episode for the BBC. And I was in the process of being diagnosed for autism at the time, and it was about an autistic woman. And I got to the final round between me and another woman, and then they changed something in the script that meant that I was no longer viable. But for that to be my first audition process, my first experience of auditioning, really just consolidated for me that I'm just gonna own who I am and 100% celebrate that at every moment, at every turn, because it can only benefit me.
When you see what's going on in the film industry, you talk about BBC, I think that's the British Broadcasting. I don't know what the C stands for, but we see you guys, since this is your field, you clearly keep up with what's going on abroad. How is what's happening here with what we call the gatekeepers that's determining in who gets where, who gets what role, who, it's almost crazy to really think about it. How does that affect where you're located at the BBC and your career path? Because you that's call it what it is. America is probably where everybody strives to come to really launch their career. But you see all the gatekeepers, you see the chaos, you see how the movie and music industry is in the comedy industry, they're all fighting. But it's funny, they all want to be famous. And tripped out part about it is they're all famous. It's kind of like, how does that affect you? And how do you guys view what's going on over here?
I personally think that from my viewpoint, there's a lot of people in the industry that have lost sight of why we do what we do.
Okay.
Or people that come into the industry and are coming into it right now, or that, even people that move from here to the US, they're not being 100% honest about why they're doing it. And you have to know why. Otherwise, you're not going to be a good actor anyway, because you need to understand yourself, but also it just spreads this awful contagious thing that I think there is of buying into the way that people outside the industry see the glitz and the glamour and the fame. And really that should be just a byproduct. I personally have never ever cared or considered the idea of being famous. It's never driven me. It's not something I'm interested in. It's a byproduct. If it happens,
Right.
okay, it happens, and I'll go from there. But it's never going to change, and it shouldn't change how you are as a person and how you are as a professional.
Right.
Just because of status that could, go away like that.
What
It's all
what
very.
what did we say earlier? What did we say earlier before we did the show? If you live by the cheers, you will die by the booze.
Yes.
You mentioned a lot of movies that are American based movies. Why is that?
In terms of, well, I think the market is massively dominated by America. Even in the UK, I think the influence of the American sector is very prominent. I even growing up here, obviously on TV, you'd watch things from the UK, but I've noticed as I've grown up and as I've seen the younger generations as well more recently, the amount of saturation of the American market, even in the UK, is immense. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. I think there's some wonderful, wonderful projects, but I think there is just this massive presence from Hollywood, from America, because it's the hub. And so I think that it is becoming, but it also means that when there are issues, I think it's easier to detect in the biggest side of things, but they do happen here still.
So our
I,
ripple effects here, our ripple effects here in the industry really affects you guys. Does it affect it on a, how does it affect it on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as what you can see?
well, a great example is the SAG-AFTRA strike and the Writers Guild, which obviously I had to sit and watch that. But it actually massively affects our industry and how we run here as well, because so much is done in collaboration with the American industry. And so we've seen, we have been hit not as much as actors and creators in America, but we have been hit. There's a standstill, there's a slow at the moment in terms of what's happening here in the industry because of the effects that has happened from everything that happened in that time. So I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, it'd probably be about a good 7, maybe 8, but it fluctuates a bit. But it really is, combined more than people think it is.
How much of how much blueprint is copied from the US? Because you said a lot of the US is the hub, is the central point. How much of that blueprint? We talked about Saga. What is the UK's version of Saga? Because it's kind of like if something is working right here, you don't reinvent the wheel. You take it abroad. But what do you guys call it? It's not called Saga over there, is it?
No, it's called Equity, and that's the UK's version of Saga. So yeah, that's the equivalent. I don't know how equivalent it is in terms of
Right.
what they offer and things, but they're our go-to union, and they protect us. They help look after contracts, things like that. I've used them a couple of times before. But it pretty much operates in the same way, and that's our equivalent. And I do think that they marry together quite well. And it's the same with union and non-union projects. A union project for the UK would be under Equity, so under Equity standards with pay, things like that. And that's something I always do
Right.
look for.
Right.
So
You're 21 years old. You mentioned something. You mentioned organizations like the sagas and so forth. You're 21 years old. How do you navigate a industry that you can become an overnight sensation and doors and opportunities open up? Are you navigating this solely? Is it important for you to have an agent? What's the pros and cons of not being represented with organizations like your version of Saga, going into an audition, making sure that if you get picked, you get the right offering for your worth? How
yeah.
was all this orchestrated at 21 years old?
Yeah, well, this is actually a very relevant question to my life right now. It's recently changed. So I had the opportunity when I was 17, 18, and I was still in drama school. I signed with an agent because of that BBC pilot audition I did. And I ended up leaving drama school early and going with her. And she was wonderful, very fiery, very protective in terms of making sure all the contracts were correct. So I was very, very lucky to have that protection from the start, which a lot of people don't have. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to not be represented, but you don't get access to the bigger auditions, the auditions and the casting directors that are going to open the doors for you as easily.
Right.
So because only agents have access to some castings. But my agent actually closed her business. So at the moment I am in between agents and I'm self-represented. And I've actually found that to be really refreshing, and I still would like to have an agent again. I think that working relationship, it really benefits me.
Well, it
But I
takes
think,
kind of like the burden off of you too at 21 years old. It
yeah,
allows you to, eventually maybe start a family, travel. You want somebody, you don't want to be the jack of all trades and master of one.
yes, and I don't pretend to be either. And I think that's the key, is there are benefits to being self-represented in terms of the unique opportunities it can bring, and you can really be in control. But realistically, I can't do what an agent does. I can't navigate contracts properly. I don't know how to advocate for myself on that side of things. The really technical business side of things. I just want to be able to do my job.
Mhm.
And so I think having an agent and having that relationship with someone that understands your goals, and it's a real 50, it has to be 50-50, where you put in your 100%, they put in their 100%, and then everyone wins. I'm not going to pretend that I know things that I don't. So I do think
Right.
having an agent is valuable.
You mentioned, I want to do my job, and I
Mm.
get it. I want to be able to do what I want to do. I want to have skills to do other things. Yeah, who doesn't? But the end game is you want to be an actress.
Mm.
How many movies have you done currently?
Gotta go back now. Must be over 10, maybe more than that. Um, and that's a good number in my perspective, because I started working professionally as COVID hit. And we were in lockdown. So a lot of there was 2 years at the start of my career
Right.
where I was operating completely behind closed doors, but it also means that I'm very good at self-taping and things
Did you
like
get
that.
scared during COVID in the UK? How did that, how did you, let me put it a different way. COVID struck everybody. Now, my opinion is it either strengthened you or it weakened you. And what I mean by that is not health wise, somewhat mentally. Let's put it like that, somewhat mentally. But if you've been a one-dimensional person, which most of us are, meaning that we only know how to do one thing, and all of a sudden you've been isolated, confinement, you really have to do some reinventing. Like, boom, like what was that like for you during COVID? Because you are an actress.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in the middle of my drama school training at the time as well, which was all online, which was a massive challenge. But I think the great thing about art in general is that it transcends, blockages. That no matter what challenge comes on, you can still create.
Right.
And I found it to be, and I since COVID, I've had this in me that anytime there's an obstacle, I turn it into opportunity, because that is what it is. You can either choose to sit down and not go over the hurdle, or you can run right over it.
Right.
And that's what I did there. Was I started, everyone was at home, so all of these people that were normally in the offices and really, really busy, everything was at a standstill. This was the time to start networking, get in touch with people, post things out on YouTube, things like that. Just get yourself out, because everyone is at home, everyone
Right.
is trying to figure out things to do. So this is the time to get in front of people that otherwise would be looking the other direction because they're too busy.
When
And
you
so
was when you was under confinement, when you was under confinement, we all had the chance to reflect.
mm,
During that reflection time at 20, you wasn't even 21 at that time.
no, I was 18.
yeah, what were some of the things that you look back on? Because I think what happens is during that time of confinement, instead of worrying about the next bill, food, and so forth,
Mm.
did you sit back and go, wow, what was one of the things, two of the things that you looked back during that moment and said, I can't believe I missed out on doing this.
Mm.
Now, even though I'm under confinement, I'm not going to let the confinement dictate. This is something that I didn't even know I missed,
Mm.
but now it's surfaced.
Yeah, I think I really understood and came to value the importance of choices. And choices even just to go out for a walk and to go here and go there, do whatever you want, the freedom, but that also then became internalized, and it really shattered my life in the perfect way, where I realized that the importance of choice and of navigating your own pathway. And up until that moment, I just followed the line as it was laid out before me and I was told I was supposed to go. And I suddenly realized when everything stopped and I could look around, is this the life that in my, like, is this life reflecting what is inside my head? Is
Mm,
this actually my life?
mhm,
Or is it fractals of everything else that I've picked up from everyone else? Is it just me mirroring everyone
mhm,
else's wishes? And I remember actually pretty much maybe a few months after the lockdown finished, so after those 2 years, um, I left. I left drama school early with an agent, and I never looked back because I went through a lot during those 2 years that weren't so pleasant. But I really had, it just made me realize the power of choice and that I had a choice and I could choose to do this my way,
mhm.
even if it wasn't traditional. And that, what have you got to lose? Because you could be stuck in your home again in a month. So, you know.
You did 10 movies. That's
Mm,
a lot for your
mm.
age. What are three of the most impactful roles, and what were the name of the movies, and why were these particular ones impactful, not only for what it did to you, but what it may have related to us as the ones that come and watch you perform?
Mm. Oh, really good question. I appreciate that. Um, I I did a short film called Press on Nails, and my character was called Maeve. And it was a film that was mostly about this. It was about demystifying and, taking away the taboo of men just following what they want to do and what their interests are. And so there was this, it was a very extreme way of putting it, but this man who was interested in drag, and my character eventually convinces him to take that opportunity, and to fall head first into something that he loves doing without letting it define him, without letting that choice define him. And for my character's story was actually all about domestic violence. And so she, by the end of the movie, was empowered to make a choice as
Mhm,
well, for love, but instead of for love of something, it was for love of herself. And for me, that role really healed something within me as well, because I related to the character in a lot of ways, but it was very much just me and the actor playing Brian, the lead, and it was just us two for a lot of it. And it really, it just it I felt seen by myself, by my own character.
mhm,
And then I remember that when it came out, I had a lot of people messaging me, um, both about Brian and about Maeve, just saying that it gave them peace almost, and it made it simple that you do have a choice, you always have a choice.
right.
um, and it empowered them to look at their lives. And I think that's the power of film in general. Is it, it sparks something within you, whether you're comfortable or not. But
Right.
I think it makes you think, and that's the most important part. I always say that film is the highest form of empathy, or entertainment, acting, being an actor is the highest form of empathy, because it it makes you empathetic within yourself, because you have to become this person and understand why they are the way they are without having an opinion on whether they're right or wrong. But it really spreads empathy to every single person that watches a film, whether they agree or not. They suddenly start having these conversations with people. They see walks of lives and see stories that they never would have thought to listen to before. And that's also reflected in a film I did, that's coming out hopefully by the end of 2024. And it's called Event, and I played Kate. She was the girlfriend of Annie, the lead, and it's on the backdrop of a sci-fi movie, very very ET style, UFOs. But really, the more you delve into the film, what it's actually about is um, beliefs and choices again,
Mm-hmm.
and the spectrum that that puts people on when they're responding to them. So my character was very much any change, any different choices, any changes in belief, she shut herself out to it all. She'd committed to one way of being that probably wasn't even her own. It probably came from her parents.
Mm-hmm.
And she never opened herself up to more, because that would require looking at herself and changing things. She really held on to everything she knew. Whereas you had Annie, who discovers UFOs and entirely changes her world around. She allows herself to be taken by that, despite the fear. And then you had Taylor, who already believed in UFOs and was very much ingrained in that belief. And she was struggling with that belief because of how strongly she's felt about it and needing proof. And so that film was really impactful, and I've had great response from that as well, from the people that have seen it in previews, because I feel like with this film, I always say whoever you relate to, whether you agree with them or you disagree with them,
Mm-hmm.
says a lot about who you are, and I think that's super powerful. So those are the two movies that really changed me, and have it's been delightful to watch other people respond to.
What is before we wrap up, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the show. I know there's a time difference where you guys are at to where we're at. What is your end game? I mean, I know that's a big question to throw out there at your age. What's your end game, and what is your message that you're trying to give out? And let me clarify what I'm saying, because we talked about this off camera. There's a difference in stardom, starism or celebrityism in the United States.
Mm.
Sometimes you can get the it can be magnified to where you forget that we the ones that buy the tickets. We the
Mm.
one that support you. Um, it doesn't hurt to stop and acknowledge your fan base. Nobody says you have to do it all the time, but if I have a little kid here, I remember watching a YouTube clip, and it was Terrence Howard, and he had just did that series, and somebody just asked him a simple question, and he was very rude, very rude. I'm thinking to myself, okay, what was it about this guy that simply watches your series, and you don't have 2 minutes to answer a freaking question? What's your end game here? Because I get sick and tired of overnight sensations that you live by the cheers, you die by the boo syndrome. Does that make any sense?
Yes, yes. For me, it's always been this, and it will continue to always be this, because it's a never-ending goal. I don't believe in setting a goal that I'll achieve and then what's next. It's always been the same thing of I just want to connect with people, and I want to get to a place, if we're talking career-wise, but also in life, where I can have conversations with people where I've seen their work, or I've worked with them, or they've seen mine, and we can talk about how that made us feel. And I love what I do because of the connection it makes, and I want to just keep growing that pool of people that I can suddenly relate to because of something I've done or something they've done. And that isn't just limited to people in my industry. I love talking to people about what things have affected them and has opened doors for them in their mind, you know. And when I do get the chance to talk to people where they say, hey, I saw this that you were in and it made me think about this, it reminded me of this, that's why I do what I do, because I love having those conversations with people. I don't see a hierarchy, I don't see the point in that. I think it's all smoke and mirrors. I think that's my goal, is to just connect with as many people as I can, hear as many stories as I can, and tell as many stories as I can.
What do we need to do in this universe to the movie industry impacts us all. We love movies, we love music, we love entertainment, period. But we also see the tapestry of the threads unwinding.
Mm.
And you're young, you are our future. I respect that. I respect the new generation. I'm open to listen versus criticism and judgment. How do we keep the tapestry worldwide together? Through music, through art, through entertainment, in your eyes?
I think that everyone has to love and surrender to the love, but surrender to yourself. I think that we complicate things way more than it has to be. Life is complex, art is complex, but actually the complex is just a series of very simple things swirling together. And I think if we can return to just watching and listening and loving, and not even, you don't even have to like something, but loving that it's given you a feeling at all, that's the future. It's bring it all back down, break it down, just listen. That's it. Is just listen, be open, surrender.
What keeps you going every day before we wrap up? What keeps you going every day? I mean, you just have so much energy that it's positive energy, because I can feel it. It's transferable energy.
Thank
What
you.
keeps you going?
I I think quiet joy is my new thing, is my new word. I call it quiet joy. I constantly seek the little moments because I have big goals, I have things that I'm working on. We all have those obstacles that I've spoken about, but real humanity and real living, not surviving, living, is in the quiet joys. It's the little moments where I'm in my garden and I see some birds and they land and they eat from the bird feeder. It's hearing children out playing on the playground that I used to play on when I was a child. It's a moment where I laugh at something that I remember, that I find funny. The quiet moments and the quiet joys are often the things that you're not experiencing with anyone else, but it's because of everyone else. It's because of the fact that we're all here together on this planet. So I think it's the quiet joys that keeps me going.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the one, the only, the next Hollywood UK Best Actress Award, Miss Isla Hughes, on the Andre the Beast Craydon show.